Welcome back to my podcast, Totally Unexpected. I'm your host, Chavie Brooke, and I'm excited to introduce to you our guest for today. Her name is Elisheva Liss. She's a licensed psychotherapist. She specializes in marriage and family therapy. She's also a speaker, a writer, and a digital educator. So, in this conversation, we dig into the systems that we are being raised in, and our children are being raised in, we were raised in, and we talk about how to improve upon them, how to make them better, how to adapt to our society today, but also at the same time, they're really honoring and respecting and valuing the system that we're in. It provides a really interesting conversation, lots of food for thought, and I can't wait for you to listen. Do me a favor, rate and review the podcast when you're done. Today's episode is sponsored by HaSofer, your one-stop shop for tefillin, mezuzahs, sefer Torahs, tzitzis, and all your holy objects. It's the perfect place to get your mezuzah and tefillin checked during Elul, an incredible opportunity to bring more bracha, blessing into your home before the high holidays. There are many places that offer to take care of the holiness of your home, the mitzvah items you need in your life. But at HaSofer, it isn't just about the price, it's about quality, spirituality. HaSofer knows how important your connection is to Hashem, and they don't compromise for less than perfect. Give them a call at 718-221-2222 or visit them online at www.esofer.com. This information will be in the show notes, and we're proud customers of HaSofer over here in Chabad of Montana. I can't even tell you how excited I am to have you here. I'm a big fan. What I admire about you so much is your ability to pack a punch in like a sentence.
Thank you.
Talk about something really complex or really vulnerable or really, just nuanced. And there's a sentence or maybe two. And it's like, if I wanted to express that, I would need 18 stories and 300 paragraphs and it lands every time. How do you do that?
Thank you so much. That is such a kind and really specific compliment. I feel like very specific compliments are the nicest ones. I've always been a words person. I like to talk. I like to write. I appreciate language very much. And actually in college, I majored in linguistics. So I love language. I think that when I was younger and to some extent still today, I have to be careful because I by nature do have a sharp tongue.
That's what I love about.
But I try to use it
poignant.
For good.
It is for good. It is always for good. It's always for good. But it's never rude, but it's always strong. It's always this is a message and we need to hear it, right? And I just love that so much. So
I appreciate that a lot because it's something that I work on. I try to be, I by nature have strong opinions and I can use words, harshly, and I try to use them in a way that is a little more tempered, humble, nuanced, but that doesn't come so naturally. So
well, I know you're doing a really good job. I admire that so much. And I relate to the opinionated, strong personality thing. I relate to that. And that's awesome. So, okay, I'm not sure I have all their terms right, but you are psychotherapist?
Yes. A psychotherapist is sort of a generic term for a talk therapist. My degree is marriage and family therapy, but it is correct to say that I'm a psychotherapist.
Correct. And marriage and family therapy, which is, I bet, such a fascinating field to be in, I'm sure. And I'm just so curious, how did you land in this field? And how did you get here?
Okay. So I had always, at the beginning of my book, I had found an essay that I wrote when I was 7 years old, one of these, you're supposed to write what I want to be when I grow up. And as an adult, I found it in my mom's house and my parents' house. And it said something like, when I grow up, I want to be a teacher and a mom and a therapist and a writer. And had clarity that those I wanted
7 years old.
At 7, right? In all fairness, they weren't particularly original aspirations.
They're doing all those things.
Thank God. Yes, I've had the opportunity and the privilege to do all those things.
Yeah.
So my dad's a psychologist, so it wasn't strange for me to want to be a therapist. And also I'm, an American Jewish woman, so it's not strange for me to want to be a therapist.
Right.
But no, thank God. It was something that I always sort of wanted to do. And I've always been interested specifically in they make a distinction between the interpersonal and the intrapersonal. Intrapersonal is more focused on what goes on like between our ears, within ourselves, the psychological self, and interpersonal is the relational part. And I was kind of torn whether I wanted to do, which degree. There's like multiple degrees that you could do, but I had a friend who was doing this degree in marriage and family therapy. At the time, it was not. It was a relatively newer field in the sense of it was just being licensed, and but she had gone in the year before me, and she said, "This is great, you would love it." So I just totally copied her.
That's awesome. You had a little, a role model to, model after. But it's interesting because not all, like, it's so cool that you're actually doing all, like, the therapist and the writing aspect of it, because you could totally be a therapist and not write, and not,
Really?
Not express yourself in that way. And you've really done so much with your therapy and have reached. What I think is so cool about that is that you can reach so many more people when you're writing courses, when you send emails, and then just the people in your practice. Is that kind of how
true.
You want it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that it was by design so much as like being born into a time where it's so available,
Yeah.
like maybe 40 years ago, I guess I could have written a column in the newspaper, which I actually have done. So maybe that's what I would have done.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that it's true. No, not everyone that's a therapist can or wants to write, and not everybody that's a writer. Some people write for the sake of writing. So, but a lot of professionals will say, like, I enjoy writing, so let me sort of take my content, and if I can see X number of clients a week, but I can reach thousands of people, via, especially in this digital age, there's like so much more that you can do, with sharing information and trying to be of help. I also like that it could be at different price points. Like not everybody's going to go for private therapy or hire a private speaker, but everyone can get an email, especially if you're willing to create free content, and a book is inexpensive, and sometimes there's groups that are more affordable. And so another way, like from a professional point of view, there's like different ways that you can offer products or free information, or at different levels, which I appreciate that.
Do you think that in this day and age, like, do you think that people now with a lot of social media expect free content? Like, how do you navigate that? Like, a lot of times, we give, like, from someone who's also on social media, we just give so much,
Yeah.
And then I find it hard, like, well, what would you monetize, and what would what do you decide is free content, and what do you decide is an email, and what do you decide is a course? And is that like, does it come natural to you just to know?
It did not.
Like,
it did not come naturally to me. And first of all, I should have reciprocated, because you spoke so warmly about me at the beginning, and I also admire you and your work and what you do and the way you speak. So thank you for what you do for for your audience, of which I am also a part.
I'm honored.
I started as a classroom teacher. I was teaching in high schools and colleges, so there was very clear. I was hired to teach, my syllabus, my courses, and then I taught those. And then when I would, give a lecture, same thing. I was, hired to give a lecture. I was, paid for an article. Once I joined social media, which I really was told by the book publicist, I have to join social media to promote my book. Have you ever seen me promote my book? I don't know.
No, I don't. I actually, without really looking and researching, I didn't know you had one.
You didn't even know I had a book, right? And you know me from social media. So that speaks to how good I am at marketing, which is not good at all.
Everybody, Elisheva has a book. We're going to talk about that.
Yes. So the way I figured out, because I remember and I'm also very low tech. Yeah. Sorry, you are also? Yeah.
Yes,
I hate I'm not old enough to be this low tech, but I'm getting older. So I don't know, maybe I can start to say that. But there are a lot of people my age who are better at tech than I am. So I have a friend, her name is Matana Jacobs, and she also has a podcast, two podcasts actually. And I asked her about, if she has someone that helps her with tech, and she referred me to our friend Heather. Now Heather's my friend. Matana introduced us. And Heather Parody is a wonderful human and very smart with tech, and very smart in a lot of ways. And she really became my sort of, like, I call her my tech fairy, but she's more than that. She's very creative and wonderful to work with. She helped me with all my digital stuff. She taught me a lot, and to this day, she will sometimes take care of or outsource to VAs the stuff that I either don't know how to do or would be more time consuming than is worth, for me to do. So I had a lot of help with her, and I also took a bunch of maybe 3 or 4 digital courses about creating content, about how to structure it, how do you know what to just give out for free, which is called content marketing, which I had learned from one of those courses. Where I've never advertised my practice, or I don't really think I formally advertise any of my offerings. But the way that I was taught to kind of share and let people know what you're offering is called content marketing. So if I'll write a letter to used to be a letter to a newspaper, an op-ed. Now I just write a blog post or I'll comment on someone else's, an interesting idea, and then somebody will write back like, "Oh, that's so cool. Tell me more about that." And so you engage with the world by sharing some interesting content, and you create like an organic relationship with people who are reading or listening to what you have to say. And by doing that, you sort of attract the kind of people very naturally who are right for you, and the people who are like, "Wow, tell me more about that." I'm like, "Well, I have a couple of blog posts." "Wow, that's cool. Anything else?" "I have a book." "Oh, okay,
Oh,
cool." Right.
I have a course, right?
Yeah, I have course. Right. So there's like a few.
Do you have a lot of offerings?
I do. Thank God. It's taken a few years, but I enjoy it. I don't think that you'd be able to write this much if it was just not, I mean, I guess people could do it, but like it comes very much from that flow state of it brings me joy. And something that I learned from a couple of different, of these courses is that maybe it's a little bit counterintuitive or it's abundance mentality, but the more generous we are with our content, the better it is, even if it's free content, the better it is as a marketing thing.
I
So
totally
people,
believe that.
right?
Yeah.
Like people don't get mad at you. Like, for example, I have we talked about this a little bit. I'm working on a new course about marriage, right? Like the top 10 struggles that I see in couples in marriage. So I was debating, do I want to like list the top 10 struggles on the landing page, or is that kind of giving away the talk? And I was like, you know what? Like, let me list them. Like, what am I gatekeeping? Like, people don't know what they struggle with in marriage. Like, that's silly.
Right. But then also it piques the interest. And then,
Exactly.
I was actually talking to somebody the other day, and she was like interested in doing maybe some kind of course or group, but they were very tight-lipped about what they were even going to talk about.
Yeah.
And she was like, how am I supposed to pay money and sign up for something that I have no idea what I'm getting into and if I'm even interested? So I feel like it's so true. Like the more information you give, the more you can share. First of all, then you attract the right people. Like no one needs the wrong people in their course. Like if you're not interested in the things that I'm talking about, then you don't need to be, right? It doesn't.
Right. I don't want
serve you or
it's not good for anyone. It's not good for anyone. Like I want satisfied consumers. Right.
Correct.
So for example, my biggest project in terms of the digital courses was the religious sex ed course, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about that later.
Yes.
Right. So the way that actually Heather gave me this advice, and it was great advice. I think Marie Forleo says this, like a lot of the people who think in terms of like generosity and abundance mentality, but are also very successful at digital marketing will tell you like give stuff away. First of all, hello, it's nice to put information out there in the world that's going to help people, even if you don't make money from it, because that's what we're here to do after all, right? Like
exactly.
People, right?
Exactly. Yes.
There's more up to life than that. But also, so Heather told me, she's like, make the first couple of lessons like free sample lessons. And I was nervous about it, not because I wanted to hoard it, but I was just afraid that if it was too available, I was afraid that it was too available, then people who like didn't agree with me could use it as fodder to be like mean, which happens a total of 0 times. It's been downloaded like thousands of times. Right. So meaning not everybody who downloads the free content purchases, and they shouldn't because it's not for everyone. But I've never had anyone get back to me with, "Wow, this stuff is terrible. You shouldn't, you shouldn't be putting that out there." Nor have I ever had someone purchase the course and then say, "Wow, this was silly. You really have like a version of this for free all over your website. I could have like cobbled it together from all your blog posts." Nobody said that either. Like it's
right. I love that abundance mindset. I really, 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 really believe in it. And I really, really, really like so many of the choices that I make, is on the premise of like, I do not want to be operating out of fear, And so if I like see fear creep up, it's almost like an invitation to be like, oh, go there,
like get curious about where that's coming from.
Yeah. Get curious where that's coming from. And maybe that's something that like is really calling you to do if it scares you so much. Do you know what I mean? Like
totally. And I agree with that. And I try very hard to live that way. But as you were saying it, I was like, maybe because I know that you guys are Chabad Shluchim, and thank you for your service. No, I really think what Chabad people do is just like, especially Shluchim, is like such a chesed for the rest of us, like for the world, But I think it's such a Chabad mindset also. It's like, we're just going to go everywhere and give everyone everything. And it's just always bless us.
Correct. I'm blessed to have been raised in that kind of environment.
System.
Totally how we operate. I love it. Yeah. Okay. So getting into what is your expertise and what you're so good at talking about. And I think for me, what I really love about how you give over this content is that I love, first of all, like you have a course called Sacred but Not Secret, right?
Yes.
And that just encapsulates how you give it over. It is sacred, we're respectful, but it's not secret. And let's talk about it, right? Let's just put it out there using the right words, right? Like not hiding behind, words that, maybe euphemisms and things like that. And it's so powerful because I think when people are exposed to that, it's almost like you can breathe, it's a relief. It's like, oh, someone's talking about this. And someone who, let's say you're in a religious observant environment, if you are in that, you are coming from that environment too. So it's relatable. So you're not just hearing it from an outside source, which then might be easy to be pushing it away, or we don't do it that way, or but here you are from the community, really, really, really doing a huge service, because I think that there's a lot of ways to improve, a lot of ways that people struggle, a lot of things that really are secret that shouldn't be, right? And I'm really, really excited to delve into all of these things, especially now that I am raising kids that are getting to be like teenagers. I have teenagers and I have, oh my gosh, this happened yesterday. I have to share this. My son comes home from school. He's 11 and he's in 5th grade in a public school. He comes to my ear and whispers, we had the puberty talk in school. and I'm like, oh, like, do you want to share any, like, do you want to share anything that they talked about? He's like, my body is doing all the things. He's like, my body is definitely changing and doing all those things, right? Like sweat, even just like regular, like sweating and growing and like, all the changes that they're feeling in their body. And it was just like the cutest thing, right? Like, oh, self-awareness. Wonderful. Like this self-awareness, like he had the opportunity to learn about his body, to learn about like what to expect. Okay, he's still 11 and he's still in 5th grade, but what to expect from his body at this stage. And I feel like what I got from him was like this like relief, like, oh, somebody gets it. Like
we can talk about this. This is not taboo. This is not a stigma. Yeah.
We can talk about this and we can we should talk about it.
Yes. 100%. Our bodies are holy and they're a gift, and we want to take care of them. And the same way, like there's no shame in taking a shower. You never hear somebody saying, oh, that's so inappropriate to be naked in the shower, right? Like we wash our bodies very shamelessly because we get in the habit of that's, we don't walk other places with undressed, but in the shower, we get undressed. And so likewise, there are other contexts and situations and conversations and circumstances where also like going to the doctor, there are times where we need to engage with our bodies in a way that is confident and clear and biologically accurate so that we can have a good relationship with our bodies and use them for all of the holy jobs that they were, tasked.
And that's the thing. Like, if we don't know, and we were never taught like what our bodies do, right?
And most people were not, right?
And what we're supposed to do. Yes, correct. Like, how do we engage in sex in a healthy, beautiful way? How do we don't have all this shame surrounding relationships and
fear, a lot of fear when you don't know about something, right?
So this is exactly where I want to dig in, but there's so many layers, because it starts like, we can start like with, okay, child, sex ed, but then I feel like we're also dealing with a whole lot of adults, especially in the religious community, that were never really taught sex ed and now are in relationships, right? And now don't have, like, there's so much unknown, there's so much fear, there's so much, I'm expected to know what to do and how to do it without ever
insecurity, right?
Talking about insecurity. So there's so many layers that I want to pick apart, and we'll see where we get to. But the first thing that I wanted to maybe go towards is like, I keep thinking like, I like to talk about things that are not necessarily always easy to talk about, but I'm also like not here to destroy the system, right? Like
Agreed.
I believe in so much of, our beautiful tradition and our beautiful heritage and the way we do things, but also like, I'm also, open to how do we do this better, right? In a sacred way.
Yes.
But also serves us a little better. So we start to see, some healthier pattern. And I always go back to this like question, like, like the forbidden, right? The things that are forbidden become so much more enticing, right?
Sure.
They become so much more enticing, and then they become
It's a verse. It's a verse in Proverbs, right? Mayim genuvim yimtaku, right? The stolen waters are sweet. It's built in, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Like we just want what we can have.
Exactly. Like nobody
right?
would have noticed the tree if it wasn't the only
Don't
tree
eat that. Don't eat
that they couldn't eat from, right? And it's also, it's fascinating. And
Yeah.
so I wonder, like, we separate girls and boys from a very young age, right? They're like separate schools and all that kind of limit interactions and
in varying degrees, we should add. Right?
I was just gonna say in varying degrees. Obviously, different communities have different
cultures around separation.
Yeah, a continuum on that separation.
Sure. It's a spectrum. Yeah.
It's a spectrum. And I wonder, like, are there negative ramifications from keeping, boys and girls in communities that keep them very, 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 very separate?
Super separate. Yeah.
Are there ramifications to that? And how do you navigate that without, like, I don't necessarily think that boys and girls should be in school together.
Fully segregated.
Fully integrated, although I grew up that way.
It happens to be, right.
My kids are growing up that way. I also, like, I went to a Jewish school, but through 8th grade, but it was a very like traditional,
like a day school style.
A day school, not traditional Judaism. It was like Jewish flavor, like you have your 20 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. Like your 20 minutes of Judaic studies and like Hebrew language. Right. And I was in school with boys up until 8th grade, and my kids are experiencing that as well.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, like, if we're going to do that, right. Which I think that's not necessarily going to change in the frum communities, in the observant community.
Nor necessarily should it, by the way.
No,
100%.
Like not necessarily as it shouldn't. But how do we kind of make?
How do we compensate for what they're missing?
Yeah, and how does it become like? So I think like, okay, separate, and then you get married.
And it's such a shock. Forget about getting married. You go on a date. There are so many young people who are going on a date for the first time and they're panicking. They're like, I've never talked to someone from the opposite sex before. What language is that? Right.
Correct. And then and then usually they're pretty, they're fast engagements or whatever. And then you get married and it's the first time
so much change and the opposite of what you were talking. Okay. So a couple of things I want to respond because you said so much stuff. I wish I had taken more notes, but I want to touch on a few pieces that you mentioned. So one thing you talked about, which I happen to resonate very much with what you said, was that we don't want to destroy the system. We want to enhance it. The one thing that I would tweak about that is that I don't think there's one. And I think that like when we talk about our community or our system, very often we're not honoring the fact. I remember when I was in high school, there was an AP Jewish history class, and we had this really great teacher who would just make us like memorize all the essays that might come up on the the one essay that we memorized was titled "Judaism has never been a monolithic religion," right? Like we've always been a diverse. We're known for this: 2 Jews, 3 opinions, 3 shuls, whatever. And so I think we just want to honor the fact that, like you said, you come from one kind of family community. I come from another kind of family or community. We serve and speak to and engage with multiple other kinds of cultures and communities. And even within each community, there are subcultures and family cultures. And so,
there's
true. It's right, like there's commonalities. And, and one of the tweets or, posts that I like to share sometimes is like, it's important to remember that we're all different. And it's also important to remember that we're all the same, like,
this is what I mean. This is what I mean.
Thank
you.
The
one sentence pack a punch, right? Like it's exactly.
Because both of those things are so importantly true, right?
It's so true.
Right? If we pretend that everybody has the same experiences, thoughts, challenges, whatever, then we're not honoring the fact that like there's magnificence and value in our different strengths and struggles, right? And if we only focus on the diversity and the differences, then we feel isolated and we don't appreciate
the thread of being united.
Right. And Dr. Brene Brown, who's probably one of the most popular, psychologist therapists in the world today, she has one of her books. She wrote a lot of books. One of them is titled "I Thought It Was Just Me, But It Wasn't." And I love that title. I happen to enjoy her books in general.
I love her books too.
You also enjoy her books, right? But that particular title, I feel like is the title of what social connection and support therapy. I don't mean just support groups, but like the therapeutic notion of relationships and connection and empathy are all about, right? Like so often the greatest shame and self-esteem stuff that people grapple with is like, I'm broken, everybody else works. Sorry?
Correct. Because you think you're the only one.
Right. I think it's just me. And then sometimes, and this is what I think the like most common feedback I get on my blog content is, well, people I don't know from different communities will write to me saying, "Thank you for telling my story. You've never even met me." And it obviously means a lot. It's wonderful to hear that and to know that, from, my computer in my office in New York, I can offer comfort to someone I've never met someplace completely, somewhere else in the world. That's a really, that's a privilege. And so in terms of just going back to this notion of working within the system rather than trying to smash the system, I'm so grateful that you noticed that because, when you're talking about topics that some people don't like to talk about and some people ideologically don't like to talk about, and it does challenge the way some, institutions do things, you invariably have to tread very carefully and respectfully. And so I try to, stick with that line of not, like never being crass, never being not too pejorative, not too critical, really focus more on like, what can we do better more than like vilifying or, condemning, like it's the adrenaline and the upset when you see people suffering makes us want to like, no, you can't do
break it all down. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or like attack where it's coming from, but that's not so helpful. It's much more helpful to offer support to the people who are struggling. And then in a much more collaborative, respectful, gentle way, use the language and the commonality to say, okay, you know what? We're seeing a pattern of suffering and of problems and of struggles. What can we do preventatively, right? We have to respond to what's going on. And we also want to prevent so much of the suffering that is, preventable, right? So,
I love that because, I agree with all of that. Like there's a lot of, glory or like, let's just smash the system and, and everything is wrong and bad. And I really align with like, okay, so the system is there. And like you said, there are many systems.
Yeah.
There are many systems.
Imperfect.
Yeah. Especially in the Jewish world, you go to every community kind of has a different system going, right?
But I want to tell you something, and you know this because you sent to public school. There are huge flaws in those systems too. So I don't think
for sure
that have
exactly.
a monopoly
It's like
on systemic flaws, right?
Correct. So it's almost like, okay, honing in on the pattern or
like looking at our family and saying like, I don't need someone else's family. I got to work with my family. So your question about like how to, is segregation creating a set of problems that more integration would solve? And I think that it would be dishonest to say that it isn't, but I think that life is always a cost benefit analysis, right? And so like every decision that you make, you're trading something off, right? So you live some place very beautiful and out of the way, but you sacrifice a lot to be there. You're able to do a lot there, and probably what you're able to do there, you wouldn't be able to do if you lived in, Brooklyn. But there's a price that you pay for being there, right? So I think that like whenever you make a lifestyle choice, whether it's ideological or cultural or halachic or whatever, there's sometimes going to be, challenges. And so I also grew up a little bit more, with co-ed social culture. And I could list all the problems with that when you put like, teenage kids together, and totally. There's, at the end of the day, kids are meant to break the rules and adults are meant to, manage the fact that kids don't color in the line. And they will, right? They will do that whether they are gender segregated. They will do that whether they are highly structured or whether you're free range parenting. Whatever lines you draw,
whatever line you draw, they'll
color outside of that, right? So I do agree, though, that let's say like if you're raising your children, you don't always have the choice because some communities are more conformity based than others. But if let's say in a community where there is a little bit more wiggle room, so let's say, for example, I can give this example from my family. We did, so we didn't do like co-ed socializing, for my kids, but we were very like on purpose. We would have like family friends over for Shabbos meals, and everybody would hang around afterwards and play board games.
Together.
And like I to know, right, in a very like supervised environment, and we traveled with family friends a lot, and so my children became like wholesome family friends with whole families of, both genders. And so, right, when they got to the age as they're getting to the age where they need to start dating or they're going to want to start dating, then it's not going to be like, what is this person of the opposite?
What is this other gender? Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly what I was wondering is like, how is there a way to, in your own family environment, find a safe way to integrate, male and females, so that it's not such a shock to the system,
Yes. Yes. And in my community and my family culture and my hashkafa, that I think of as a lichatchila, an ideal way to offer that. So like we're not like sending them to mixed parties when they're 15 years old.
Right.
But in our shul, in our neighborhood, in our home, there's like a warmth and a camaraderie between all the kids, and that works very nicely. But I also want to double click on that word you said, safe, because I think that safety is a little bit of an illusion too. Meaning a lot of the unsafe things that happen in gender segregated environments. They happen within immediate families. They happen under the noses of adults, unfortunately. And so, sexual safety and child safety is a different conversation. But I also
Right.
feel like
Right.
there is like sort of a false sense of security when people do gender segregate. And they think like, well, if my daughter's not around boys, then nothing,
Nothing
untoward
will
could happen.
happen.
That's not true.
No.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
look, God bless and save everyone, but it's,
Yeah.
it's just not the
Yeah.
case. So, yeah.
And
So
that's
there's
also
no
where a lot of this sexual awareness,
Totally.
can really help. When you teach your
Yes.
child like what's safe and what's unsafe, what's appropriate touch, what's not appropriate touch, right? Like all
Totally.
those things are really important. I think, especially in a segregated environment, because how else would you know any of this stuff if you're not being told?
Exactly.
And I want to just go back to the point that you said, like everything's a choice, and every choice that you make has a ramification, or it's nothing's perfect, right? And I heard this line from Nicole Sachs. I don't know if ever heard who she is. She's like she has a podcast called The Cure for Chronic Pain. And she talks a lot about this idea of like life is always a choice of what hurts and what hurts worse. Because everything that you choose has a part of it that will hurt, right? And you have to
There's no free
decide.
lunch.
Exactly. And you have to decide in your life, in your circumstance, in your environment, and it will look different for everybody, what hurts and what hurts worse. For some people, taking this example, being completely segregated is a choice that hurts less than a different choice. And then for some people, it will be the opposite, right? Just
Yes.
depending on upbringing, environment, kind of how you see things and all of that stuff. But like you said, I think it's so important because so many people think on the other side, it's perfect. Like if only we did it this
The
way,
grass
then
is always greener.
yeah, there'd be no problems. And no, there's problems everywhere, right? You have to
Yeah.
really dig deep, and you really have to understand your family and your environment and your circumstances to know like the decision you're making, and understand the fallout of the decision you're making so you can support where it could go wrong.
Like supplement where it falls
Yeah.
short. And I think
Yeah.
as your kids get older, recognize that your children are different humans. And so, what worked for child number one
Yeah.
might be a disaster for child number two, and they need a different approach, whether it's institutionally, socially, in terms of the rules that you set and how much, how wide of a leash you give them. So I think that's a really, really important piece as well. And I know that part of like going back to what you said before, the choices that you make,
Yeah.
if you are in a more sort of insular community where you make the choice to adopt the heritage that comes along with that lifestyle and living in that community, then sometimes you have to get a little more sort of like creative. In the private realm to meet the psychological and emotional needs of your kids. And sometimes people will make the choice, I'm going to move to a different community because we need a little bit more breathing space for some of our kids. And a lot of people will view that as like a failure. Oh, you couldn't fit in where you are. I think that's a very holy thing to do.
Yeah,
like
so
to say, like we
brave.
need to replant these flowers where they can grow in the environment that's right for them.
100%.
Obviously that's a very big decision to make. You just first try to work with what you have. But yeah, I think all of these choices and these decisions and these struggles, like you said, the grass is sometimes greener on the other side, and sometimes the grass is greener on another side. You know what I mean? Not all.
And you recognize that, and
you move to the other side. But
exactly. But don't think that once you get to the other side, it's
going to be perfect, right?
Rainbows and unicorns, right?
Yeah.
And the question is, so basically, I feel like was this the impetus of creating the Sacred But Not Secret course, to support families in these insular environments, to have tools to teach their children, all this information that's maybe not happening in the system?
So I guess so. It's I wouldn't say not, but I would describe it a little bit differently.
Okay.
The way that it came about was as follows. I was studying to be a general psychotherapist. I was doing the interpersonal approach of marriage and family therapy and theory, and I was wide open as to like what my specialty was going to be. The first few private clients that I got, after I got my license and did all the hours where I could work by myself, were couples. And I had been taught in grad school that part of doing an assessment of couples was to ask them about their sexual relationship. I just assumed everybody else was doing that. everybody else was not necessarily doing that. Not
Wow.
nobody was doing it, but it wasn't as widespread as I thought.
Mm,
And particularly in Jewish and particularly in Orthodox communities,
for
word
sure.
spreads, right? So it's like, go to Liss, she could talk to you about sex.
Right.
So,
Like it's on the
there was
table.
a hunger, like there was, a little pet peeve of mine is when people say nobody talks about this or I'm the only one. No, people talk
No.
about it. I'm
You
not
just
the
have
only
to
one.
find it. Yeah.
I'm right. I'm not the
Yeah.
first. But I do think that when I started, there weren't very many of us.
Mhm.
There was like the generation before me, let's say like people my parents' age, there were probably, you could count on one or two hands how many like Shabbos observant, sex therapy oriented, therapists that I knew of, right?
Mhm.
In my
Mhm.
generation, there was a little bit more, but it was still like not so comfy. Now, when you talk to the 20 something year olds, like this is so popular. Like lots of people want to do this. And I think that's wonderful. Like the sex is ubiquitous, like it's a part of life. So why shouldn't we have people from all different communities and backgrounds educating people better about it?
I have to interrupt for 1 second because I
Please.
literally just heard this. It was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect because I'm just going to be talking about this. I think I heard on another podcast, sex is a thing and we have it, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's just start there, right?
Right.
Like, this is a thing and
Yeah.
we have it. So let's learn about it, right? Let's open up the table to discussing it so it can be what it's supposed to
We can
be,
deal with
right?
it,
We
right?
can deal with it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I do want to acknowledge, because I'm sure we probably have some listeners who are thinking, but what about Ein Darshan, like Arayas Bifar Hasya, right? The Talmud says, the Gemara says that you're not supposed to teach about, Arayas actually means nudity, and it's a reference to the illicit sexual relationships. But
Okay.
people usually use that to mean like you don't like publicly speak about sex, right?
Mhm,
Meaning not that there
mhm.
shouldn't be education, but it should be done, privately, right? And that is a sensitivity that I understand and I respect. What I will say though is that we live in a time that is uniquely and particularly public. And what we've learned over the generations, and this is not new, the Rishonim talk about this also, is that there's always tension around how much to, almost like political tension. There's conservative and then there's liberal, right? How much do we hold on to the tradition, the Orthodox, the way things were, and how much do we adapt so that we don't lose the next generation and we can keep things, current and alive, right? And there's no one size fits all
Yes.
answer, right?
Yes.
And so I think that in a lot of communities, and I don't think that I don't attribute malice, but I think that in their zeal to not darshan arayas befar hestia, they end up inadvertently enabling a tremendous amount of really terrible averos beseter, like
Mhm.
meaning really, really dysfunctional and traumatic things happen in
Happening in
private
secret.
because they're not because there's no education before Hesia. And
Yeah.
so what ended up happening was I got this specialty. I was like, okay, everybody wants to learn about sex. I guess I should specialize. Got myself a supervisor, took some sex therapy trainings. Made myself more knowledgeable, started reading, and ended up with this like sort of accidental specialty, which my friends who I went to high school with think it's hilarious because like in the health class where they were teaching us these things, I would be the one who'd be like, I need to go to the restroom and like not come back.
I don't want to know about this.
I do not want to hear about this from you.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Yes, I was like that kid that did not want to talk about these things. I didn't appreciate dirty jokes. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
like, oh no, I had this like very, fascination with sexuality and I want to sublimate it. No, on the contrary, I was actually quite avoidant about talking about it. But I did, get married. And like you said, like once you are an adult, this is part of life. So I was working with couples and eventually, they started asking me to speak and, give presentations and workshops, et cetera. And what would happen almost every single time I would come to speak, the topic would be something like marriage, sexuality, intimacy, those kind of topics. And there was always like a Q&A at the end. And in every single Q&A, the discussion would get really animated, 2 or 3 questions in, something along the lines of like, oh, I wish I knew this stuff when I first got married. How can I protect my children from having like the bumps and bruises that I had to learn, the hard way? Like, how can we do better? Like, I want to teach my kids so that they don't end up in this like ignorant position that I was in. But like, I don't know any better than my parents did. What am I supposed to do? And I remember I used to say like, yeah, wouldn't it be great if there was like a handbook that was culturally sensitive that people could use? And I'm not going to say there wasn't, because there were. Dr. Yocheved Debow, I want to give a shout out to her. She's one example of someone who's, I wouldn't say a full generation, but she's a little more senior than I am. And she wrote a wonderful book and recently updated it, and I highly recommend it. It's called Talking About Intimacy and Sexuality. She is an Orthodox professional. So she has both, Torah and clinical
Good
knowledge
resource,
on
yeah.
Amazon. She's great.
Okay.
And then I don't know if she's a doctor. I think she is Sara Diamond. Diament, wrote like a thinner book, like a less, like Dr. Debow's book is more of a, is a longer book. Dr. Diamond's is a quicker read. Very, very beautifully. I think they did a great job talking of, amalgamating, halachic sexuality and education.
Mhm.
So that was like a resource that was available.
Yeah.
But people also want, conversation. They want speaking.
Interaction.
Examples. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There were just
Yeah.
different mediums and media. And so people, I could tell there was just like this hunger of parents who, like, a lot of times what people will just swallow for themselves, like, oh, whatever, it's fine, I'll be okay. They want better for their children, right? Like very often we'll like procrastinate going to the dentist, but like when our kids tooth hurts, we'll take them, so
Yes.
um, so I had been like thinking about this for a couple of years. And I was just like, you know what? I would, instead of doing all of this damage control with like, adults who didn't know better and like ended up hurting themselves or each other or feeling traumatized or rejected or guilty and all the things. Wouldn't it be nice if we could raise kids that have fewer of these problems? We're not going to, prevent all the problems, but we could prevent some of the problems, and we can arm people with the knowledge so that they can deal with them faster so that they don't fester for years.
Mhm.
So I started working, got Heather's help, and started working on this curriculum. And thank God it's, it's probably the biggest, project that I've done in terms of digital courses. I've done probably like 5 or 6 of them by now, working on another one now, but like that was sort of the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So I mean, like, it's amazing. Like there was a need and you were positioned and you found a way to fill that need. Obviously, to the best of your ability. Like there's always work to do.
There's always more to do.
There's always more to do, as you know, if you're in a field of, mental health and growth and healing, like there's always work to do. Do you think that there's this expectation of like the fairy tale, like you get married, you're supposed to like be intimate and know what feels good and know what your partner, likes and be able to just navigate, like I think there's this illusion that sex is just a simple matter, right?
It's natural. It's natural. Naturally. Yeah.
And this is this fairy tale thing, and it's just not like that.
It's not always like that. Meaning, I don't want to take that away from people. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there are another project that I did a bunch of years ago was I was giving a talk for some college teachers, some bride educators in Brooklyn. And they were from very religious communities, Hasidish and Yeshivish, and they were a little older. And one of the things that I mentioned was I said, for a lot of your students, you might be the first or only place that they learn about sexuality from. So it's so important, even though you have to teach the laws and the halacha and the practices, to give them, some healthy sex information so that they can walk in with like, knowledge and positivity and, the notion of pleasure. And I saw that we're like looking at each other, and one woman looks at me and she goes, Elisheva, we know that that's true. We also were not educated about this stuff. That's not what we were trained to do. And so we only can draw from our own experiences. We don't really have so much knowledge to offer in that realm. They were very knowledgeable about the halacha that they were giving over, but this is sort of a different, kind of the idea of what a college teacher's job is an interesting question, but we'll put that aside for now. But so one of these women asked me, right? She said, would you write something up for us? And I said, yes, I will. Thank you for asking. And I went home that night and I wrote up a 10-page single space document, which is nowhere near enough, but it was a lot more than what these particular teachers had to offer. It was a script for, college teachers, bride educators, for people in very more insular communities who were going to presumably have had, little to no sex experience and very little education, just sort of to give them an overview of, a more sex positive approach of, what to expect and how to communicate. And so at first I was distributing it to college teachers. It was a free thing. It was just to give out. And at this point, I made it available for, any adult woman who's interested in having it, so it's been downloaded thousands of times. And that's something that I felt good about being able to create, because again, there was a need, and so another thing that was interesting about the sex ed course, the Sacred Not Secret course, is that it was designed as a guide for for parents. But what ended up happening was a lot of the people who are taking it are not parents. They're not necessarily parents yet. They're not parents, maybe they're older than, like, their kids are launched, whatever. They're single or they're newlyweds without kids. And very often the feedback that we're getting is, I took that to re-educate my own inner child. I just found it very healing my therapist told me to get it and do it, because there would have been something so like healing of, it's not just you.
Correct. And if you didn't get that education as a child, you inherently are missing a little bit of that yourself. And then you're expected to educate the next generation. And I actually was going to ask that. I feel like this course is very beneficial, even as an adult, to kind of go back to your inner child, right? Or the child that wasn't necessarily maybe, there's many people who got educated, in a very, open and way that served them well.
That was helpful.
That was helpful. But I think for the majority of us, in
all communities, by the way, surveys everywhere in the West.
In secular communities too.
That's what I'm saying. In all communities, most people who are adults now, you ask them, the like 60, 70% of people, if you say, were you happy with the amount and quality of sex ed that you got from, family, school, or whatever, most people will be like, no.
Well, I think it's a very much a generational thing, because I've heard many people who weren't even Jewish, whatever, say like, oh yeah, there was a book. I got a book, right? Totally. A book left on the counter.
Left on your bed, right.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, so this wasn't a cultural thing. It was a
generational thing.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So I don't think it's at all it's
not restricted to one community or another. However, the more sheltered or insular a community is, the fewer resources accessible.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's how you wanted. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like meaning when I ask people, where did you learn about sex? Very often they'll say, movies, TV, books. But if there were no movies, TVs, and books, right, those kind of books, then what I always tell people, and it sounds scary, but I think I don't mind the shock value, because it's true. If we don't teach our kids about sex, they're very likely to hear about it from peers, porn, or predators. Right. And those are not the resources that we want our kids to learn them from. And then I remember somebody says to me, well, what do you mean? Sometimes they're going to learn it from their premarital educator. I'm like, very rarely do they get all the way to premarital educators to get the information. And by the way, when they do, that's also traumatic, because congratulations, you're engaged. Guess what you're going to be doing, right? So that's also, maybe it doesn't have a P word to go with it, but it is traumatic.
Yes.
So, and by the way, I just want to say something, because I hear myself sounding a little bit arrogant. I don't have a monopoly on sex education, right? Like, meaning there's a lot of ways to offer good sex education and a lot of resources for it. This is just like, I was looking to fill what seemed to be a void in a particular language, cultural sensitivity, religious, angle. But, and another thing that I've noticed that I feel really happy about is that when I started doing this work, I wouldn't say that I got a lot of pushback. Like, thank God, the vast majority of receptiveness was very warm, very appreciative, very supportive.
Every so often. I would
thank God. Yes, no, we have communities are beautiful. You know what I mean? Like, I think most people their hearts are in the right place. But I did have people who were a little bit critical, or they didn't agree with that, or you shouldn't be doing that, or
scared.
Right. Or definitely like something that's different makes people uncomfortable. And then over the years, I found that even some of those people who said things like that started to do their own sex ed, like talks and courses and articles.
And you're like, okay, win, success.
Right.
Like,
thank God. Right. And one of my friends is like, doesn't that make you mad? I'm like, it makes my ego mad, but it makes my soul happy. Like, yeah, it would have been nicer if we could have all been like friends about it together, but like we all arrive at where we're growing in different times and places. And I'm sure I've been a hypocrite at every stage of my development, where I'm like, hey, I really believe in this and I'm excited about that. And 5 years ago, I would have been like, no, that's not true. So we're all just kind of on our own journeys.
I heard we evolve and we grow. And I actually heard something really profound, that's simple and profound, which is always the most profound things are always the most simple, but it was like, we're allowed to change our mind, like you can change your mind. And
we should. Like, how sad would that be if we had the exact same opinions and knowledge at 70 as we did at 20, right?
Right. The whole point of like growing older and having more knowledge and gaining more wisdom and hearing from more people is that we change our mind. We evolve into thinking and feeling different things with, the stage of life we're in, then the information we have, the age we are, all those things contribute to just
how we evolve as people. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, first of all, I did not hear any hint of arrogance. So you're very, that was not an issue. And I love how you called out, your ego versus your soul, right? Because we all have an ego, right? But when you can be like, okay, that hurt my ego, but like my soul is good with it, it's just very real and like helps us kind of separate ourselves from like falling into the trap of letting our ego drive our decision making.
Yes. Or black and white thinking. You know what I mean? Like something can make me uncomfortable emotionally, but still feel right ideologically, or vice versa, like.
Yeah. If anyone who knows me and my black and white thinking. Like I talk about that all the time, right? Like we there's nuance, right? There's always nuance. We like to I think black and white thinking is sometimes feels safer, right? And it feels like a little less scary because it's either wrong or right. And then if it's how could it be a little wrong and not, so I think it's safe, but we don't usually serve ourselves very well if we're stuck in that, very
binary thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we live in a time of the yes and evolution.
Yes and correct.
I always say like nuance is my love language. Like I love the idea
Me
of
too.
not being, right.
Yes, correct. So so we want people to like be able to talk about these things, right? We want in a way, like I said, we don't have to disrupt and blow up these systems, right? But
yes.
we want as a service, and also when you said about like, okay, we're not supposed to be talking about these kinds of intimate relationships and sex in public, like, okay, we're not maybe supposed to be talking about our personal,
I have a lot of answers to that.
But like,
darshaning that Gemara, but yes, there's
but like, just like, and I think we do have to just acknowledge that everything is out there right now. Right. And if
I want to tell you a funny story about that. At one point, somebody was like giving me a little bit of a hard time about that, in Darshan Arayas Bifar Hestia. And he was like getting worked up. And he's like, yeah, it's just like, it's so like discordant. It's so like disjointed, not appropriate and whatever. I'm like, imagine like talking about like Gilei Arayos and Shul and Yom Kippur, right? He's like, exactly. I'm like, open your mouth, sir.
We do. We
read about the Arayos and Shul and Yom Kippur.
It's actually really fascinating because a lot of the Torah, like, sometimes explicitly,
very explicitly,
sharing
and not prudish.
No, like we're sharing these stories of our ancestors and why to learn from them, to understand what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, but like there's no like. Sometimes you read these stories and you're like, oh my gosh,
you can
I say this in front of my child? Like, so
you taught that to children, right? Actually, that brings me to another project that I would like to share about with your permission.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I started this email. It's a free email, almost weekly email.
Yeah.
That I called the Schmooze Letter because Heather said it was called the newsletter. But I'm like, I don't always have news, but I'm happy to schmooze. So I call it my Schmooze Letter. Thank you. So for 2 years, it was like thoughts based on the Parsha, like psychological insights based on the weekly Torah portion. And then after a couple of years, I was ready for a change because I was afraid I was going to start repeating myself. And I started using the verses from the Song of Songs from Shir HaShirim as a springboard to talk about, love and relationships and intimacy and sexuality. And so we are over halfway through. It must be like at least a couple of years in, and every week or almost every week, we use a verse from the Song of Songs and we use it as a springboard. If it lends itself very easily based on the commentaries for a relationship advice, I will just,
go
quote
right there.
that.
Yeah.
But if it, but sometimes I'll get a little more creative because, because I want there to be like a practical takeaway and it can't be like a 10-page, essay. Right. So I just wanted to mention that because, because you're talking about, working within the system. And by the way, you want to tip my hat to the system. It's systems. At least once every couple of months, sometimes more frequently, I will get a message from schools of all kinds and stripes asking if I could come and do a workshop for either the teachers or the parents or both about how to incorporate healthy sexuality education within like the holy Jewish type of framework.
Well, that's very encouraging.
It's right. Isn't that nice to hear? Unfortunately, I tend to shy away from speaking gigs lately. I just haven't been in the mood. And also like the traveling, whatever. There's reasons why I'm not doing it. But I think one of the projects on my bucket list would be to create a curriculum for the classes. For the schools. However, I will say this, and this is my bias that a lot of people don't agree with, and that's fine, is that I like the primary source to be the parents. I think that like it's great when teachers and rebbeim and educators are armed with the knowledge that when you're teaching biology or chumash or mishnayos and you encounter an educational opportunity to sanctify sexuality in the body and incorporate these messages, that's beautiful and holy and wonderful. But as far as like the bulk of the curriculum of sex ed, I think that when you have, healthy, loving parents able to give it over, or even if like the parents are uncomfortable and they, delegate it to the fun aunt or something, I like that to be more like, that's where I like the not bifar part of it. I like, because you can track your child's face and response, and whether they're like done listening to you in this conversation right now. Whereas in the classroom, it's different.
Absorbing. I agree. I feel like it is a very much a parent-child, relational kind of experience.
Yes.
And I think the school can be supportive of it. I think the school can enhance, right, what is taught at home. But if they're just learning it in school, have no, no conversation at home, about it, I feel like it's
a disconnect. There's
a
big
disjointed, it's a disjointed thing. So I definitely think like, as parents, like that's kind of part of our job.
That is part of our job. Totally.
It's not necessary. It's uncomfortable. It's a little awkward and all those things. And it doesn't.
And you want your kid to come to you when they have their period, when they ejaculate for the first time, when they have fantasies, if they discover porn, like you want to be the trusted adult that they come to, because they're probably not going to go to that teacher or that rabbi, whatever. And like, we want to be that safe place. We want to be that, if they have resources in school that they trust and they want to ask questions to, and they're safe people, wonderful, beautiful. But I think that, Vishinantam Levanecha, the obligation to educate our children, that's our obligation, right? Like we weren't necessarily supposed to outsource all of it, that's just my bias.
No, I agree with that. And I think especially for the child, it will feel much more wholesome and whole. And like you said, like sometimes I've been in a position where like my child is telling me something that like, I'm like, I don't want to know about this, or
you have to check yourself and be like, my hangups shouldn't become your hangups.
I'm like, what is happening? And then I'm like, I always come back to like, but I'm so glad.
Thank God they want to come to you.
That in the end, like even though this is hard for me to hear, right? Like they feel safe to share with me, even if things are outside, what my, value system is, or, whatever. I still want, like, as hard as it is, my end goal is to be that person.
Ideologically, you want to be the person. And
also practically, like I want to be that person that kids will tell me anything. And it is not their job to worry about how I'm going to deal with it or handle with it. That's my job,
Yes.
So the only way that happens is if they, you have conversations.
Those lines of communication open. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. So I guess in my dreams, if I were to be like, oh my gosh, like how could we enhance the system, which you're already doing, but how, like, where is this area that I feel like could be, let's put the kid part aside for a minute, right?
Yeah.
Where do I feel or see that could be really beneficial from people I've spoken to, family, friends, whatever, just having casual conversations, is this, where people come into a relationship and you don't even have, it's not even that you have to know everything about sex. It's not even that you have to have every single piece of information, but the two partners, the two parties come in knowing that this is something that we could talk about, right? And we could explore together, and we don't expect each other silently just to be able to, get the hang of it. And I just also some of that shame, I think it's not anyone's fault necessarily, or it's not. And I think this is in the secular culture as well, but there's a lot of shame surrounding sex. So
Adam Harishon and Chava, maybe.
Maybe it goes back to that.
They started really
a small little reason why
back to the fruit. And by the way, I just, for people who do have sexual trauma in their families, I know we're talking in a lighthearted way, but then sometimes there is somebody's fault. I don't want to pretend that nobody's ever to blame. That being
100%, 100%. No, if there's sexual trauma and there's those serious situations, 100,000%.
Right.
But I'm saying
the systemic issue, right? The systemic issue, right?
Yeah. Even people who have not experienced sexual trauma, I feel like there is a little bit of a veil of shame and thinking that I'm supposed to know, right? Yeah. I'm supposed to know, and we're supposed to just figure this out. The second we're married and we're, everyone's trying to fumbling along, trying to figure out like what happens if, it became a little bit more, I don't want to say accepted because it's not accepted, just kind of normal to talk about it with our spouse and not only in a negative way, but in a positive way, like explore that kind of relationship aspect you get what I'm saying? I feel like I'm
Yes,
not being
yes.
that
Like
clear.
I think what you're asking is how can we affect the change that you're dreaming about? Like to create a society where fewer people will be held back at the onset of their marriage with that sense of imposter syndrome of like, I'm not really a sexual person. I don't have the language or the confidence or the clarity or the anatomical familiarity to do these things that are supposed to feel good. And even if I did, I feel like awkward talking about it or experimenting with it, right?
Right.
Like,
Or asking like, I had this written down, but like, yeah, like to just have a neutral kind of positive conversation around it.
yeah. So I'll tell you like this. I think that like, if you look what's going on, look at what happens or is happening in the realm of mental health, relational health, social health, over the last couple generations, right?
Mhm.
We moved from people, smacking and shaming kids towards more, gentle, collaborative parenting. And there's, some controversy about how far to take that. But for the most part, I think there's been like a gentilizing of
Yeah.
how we do education. And I think that that's also happening in the realm of sex education, where it used to be like, shh, don't talk about that. That's so gross. That's inappropriate. That's disgusting. You're dirty, whatever. And
Mhm.
again, I don't think that's unique to the religious, to the Jewish community. I think
Right.
religious communities across the board probably have the added, sin component to it. But I know
Yes.
plenty of secular people have
Yes.
these complexes as well. And I
Yes.
think, thank God, there's been sort of a grassroots. I never know if I'm using that word correctly, but like it's happening at the granular level, where individuals like you and like me and like lots of other like-minded parents and educators and members of the clergy, we're seeing what's going on in droves. I think social media has done a lot of harm, but one thing that it does that's really helpful is it gives us like large numbers of data in real time. And so
Kind of
like
insight of like what's going on, you
they
know?
use that word insights, right?
Yeah.
One of the biggest booms in my work was when a very popular, it's happened a couple of times actually, when like sometimes someone who's like has a much larger audience than I do did an interview with me or an Instagram live with me and shared my work. And then I was able to, they signed up for my newsletter or they would buy my book or they would take my course and then they would share that information onward. And again, like there's the practical component. Okay, now we can reach more people. But then there's also the social change that comes along with that.
Mhm.
Right. And so
Mhm.
even like when you go to some of the school events and you hear the way people are talking now, it's changing. It's
It's
changing.
changing. It
And
is.
and
It is.
Rome wasn't built in a day. So like even let's say at the political level, if you look at America, right? So there are like the far left, they want to just burn the country down and make a new one, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And the far right, and they're like, shut up, everything's perfect, stop complaining,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, that's so true.
But most of us are like in the middle moderate. We're like, this is a really good country compared to all the other countries out there that we could have. I mean, you want to go to North Korea? Also, there's flaws that we're working on making better all the time. And over the arc of our history, we have constantly been making it a fairer, freer, better version of itself. And so we want to do that at a political level. We want to do that on a national level. Let's say as Jews, we want to do it communally. We want to do it in our families. I want to do it ourselves. I forgot which Baal Musar is, maybe Rabbi Strauss Salanter or someone who said like, when I was a young person, maybe whatever, somebody really wise
Really big.
said like, when I was young, I wanted to change the whole world. Right. And then as I got older, I was like, maybe I could just help my community. And then I got a little older, maybe I'll work with my family. And then I got older, I'm like, you know what, let me just work on me. And then that
I
person
love
wrote the
that.
kind of Sparran that like changed the entire world,
That's
And
brilliant.
isn't
That's
that beautiful?
brilliant because it's really true. Like
I wish
before
I
you
remembered
go
which tzaddik it was.
try to like change the world, like, okay, what's going on
Let
in
me start
here?
with me. Like, let me look,
Yeah.
like starting with the man in the mirror. I'm not going to say who said that because we're in his noble. But like, I think that like by looking in our mirrors and saying like, what was I like? What do I wish? Like people always say, create the product that you would have liked to have, right?
Mhm.
So sometimes when I write, my blog posts or my social media posts or whatever, people are like, how did you know what I was thinking? I'm like, I didn't. I just knew what I was
I
thinking.
was
And
thinking,
when I
yeah,
right, and I've learned that when I don't share every single thought or feeling that I have because
of
like hello
course.
boundaries.
Yeah.
But I share
Hello.
probably too many of them. But sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes when you write like, hey, this is a problem, or if I write about like a rule that I have when I write about cases in my blog is it has to be that at least 3 of my clients could look at that and be like, oh, that's me. So meaning it's not any one person,
Mm.
right? But what ends up happening is I get hundreds, sometimes even thousands of messages saying like, hey, that's me. And most of them I haven't met.
Yeah.
And so I think by looking at the individual, the yachid, we end up helping the klal. And that's why people love stories. People like novels and movies. And like, when we have social change that comes through narrative, it really makes a difference. And so, yeah, I wish we could wave a magic wand and tikkun olam poof overnight. But like, God didn't give us that option yet. Maybe at some point we'll get it. But for now, I just got to like take my shovel and dig one at a time.
And everyone in their little corners and everyone in their little like expertise. And I do think that I agree with you. I think that there are shifts and there are changes, and we are like
it's totally happening. I wish it were more and better and faster, but like we're always impatient to bring Geula, aren't we?
Right. And it just, that, and I always say, I tell this to my kids all the time, and I tell it to myself all the time, like lasting change takes a long time, like you want to, if something happens fast and furious, right, then it doesn't last.
It's usually not stable. Yeah.
It's not stable. It's not sustainable. Right. Like, and so something that you talk about weight loss, talk about your growth in your Yiddishkeit, talk about anything habit forming, everything that is lasting ends up taking time. And when we want to rush it and we want to like, just, all of a sudden
want a shortcut.
All the changes, like how sustainable is that? Right. Especially if you're working within the Torah system, and we value and we respect the Torah system. And like you said, there's ways to apply it to our generation and to looking at our generation's needs and saying, okay, maybe that worked, or maybe it worked or it didn't work, but that's how it was done, 100 years ago.
We'll never know because we don't have the data on past generations, right?
Exactly.
But another piece that I'll say, and I don't know your audience in particular, but I think being a person of faith is that when we see things in the world that are like broken by our standards and we're like, it shouldn't be that way, even let's say like, I don't know when you're releasing this, but right now, like I am very preoccupied with the hostages and we all are, right?
Yeah,
like the war in Israel. And like, I have been having a lot of very heated conversations with God about this. And like, what in the world? Like you are omnipotent and omniscient and all kind. And what the heck is going on here? And like, I think that when we see suffering, human suffering, and we know that God loves us and we love each other, we're like, this is not the way it's supposed to be. And from the mortal perspective, we can rumble with those things, whether it's in our own lives or other people's lives or the world at large. And I think on a like existential theological level, like taking a breath and being like, we don't have all the answers. God is bigger and wiser. And he said that all of this pain and brokenness has to be here for now. And our job is just to make whatever little difference we can in our little scrap of earth, one piece at a time. And he'll do the rest that he needs to do. And I feel like that like reminds, again, back to the humility piece. Like if he wanted it to be all better overnight, he could and would do that.
He could do it. Yeah, exactly. I love that. And I am going to so hard because I had so many more things.
I know this is so much fun, but we both have to do our day.
I know. I guess the last kind of little question I want to ask you to leave off with, and then maybe I don't know, like I might maybe have show notes and I can list a lot of the resources that you've mentioned, because I have to say the Schmooze letter, like I signed up recently and I love it. It's so good. I actually had a bunch of things from there that we wanted to address, but that's okay.
Maybe we'll talk again one day.
We'll talk again. Oh, for sure. We'll talk again. And also like you can sign up for the Schmooze letter and like have these things in your inbox, and then maybe you're motivated to do the course or motivated to read the book, or, there's these resources for you at hand. This podcast is not the only place that you can hear Elisheva. She has many places where you can hear her. I think, what do you think's all, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer in short, but you'll tell me, what's like a long-term realistic goal in a marriage in relation to?
When you say intimacy, do you mean sex or you mean all forms?
All forms.
So I think that it's not that it's too long of a question to answer usefully. I think it's just too broad, because it's kind of like when I'm starting with a new client and I'll ask them to share their therapeutic goals, they're like, we just want to be happier. I'm like, okay, everybody wants that, but like, can we get a little more specic? What do you feel? I mean, obviously I'm not snarky in session, or I try not to, but
I don't know. I kind of like snarky therapists.
Some of my clients really enjoy the snark, but I got to feel that out first.
Exactly.
But no, but I think like, the long-term goal, what I pray for and bless people when I go to the weddings and, is like, let them have peace, let them grow together, let them bring out the best versions of each other, let them, raise healthy family, let them do in the world what God put them here to do, like these broad, but very lofty, but also very fundamental goals that we all pray for ourselves and each other and our spouses. And I think having an intimate relationship, physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, it's part of that, and that's, I don't know if you saw today's Schmooze letter yet, but I think that the foundation for that is the capacity to express and connect and share, because we're all works in progress, right? Like we're all going to struggle with stuff. But if I feel safe to tell my partner, like, I'm really struggling with this. And I know he's going to be like, let's talk about it. What's going on? And like, he holds me and he helps me figure it out. And I can do that for him. Then, wow, aren't we a great team? Like, this is working, And we're all going to have our better days and our harder days and our moments where we don't feel as understood. It's messy out there, life. But I think the goal would be that we keep coming back to this, like, we're here, and like the triangle is stabilized with, God and purpose. So it's like, partner, divinity,
Right. So I think it's pretty safe to say that like physical and emotional intimacy are kind of like two sides of one coin.
It's a good question. I am reluctant to oversimplify it that way, because I've met so many incredible couples who've done a fantastic job maintaining their emotional intimacy, even though they hadn't quite figured out the physical intimacy yet.
That's such a good point.
And I don't want to take that away from them or make them feel like their emotional intimacy is deficient just because their sexual part isn't working well. And vice versa. Every so often you meet people who are amazing in bed together, but they just like are fighting over everything else. So yes, I think that there is more often than not, and I have a lot of blog posts on this, when we boost the emotional intimacy, very often the bedroom will, reap the benefits, and vice versa. When the bedroom is going well, very often there's oxytocin, dopamine, all the good stuff afterwards. So they're very, very interconnected. But I would say like not
always. That's a really good point, because you can have a really good, emotional intimacy and be really connected and still struggle in the physical intimacy.
And sometimes the emotional intimacy is even enhanced by that struggle. Like I'll have couples
you're forced to. Yeah.
Right. Like they've been working on it together, and they're such good people, and they're so kind, and they care so deeply about each other, but they're just like not figuring out what feels good in bed together. And it's like, you guys are such a beautiful team, because like they're so attentive to like, but I don't want to do that if it hurts you, but I don't want to deprive you. And I don't want to, so like, I'm reluctant to make it that simple, but yeah, but
there's the nuance, right? There's the
exactly.
Everything lives in nuance. And I feel like we like these like black and white statements, or we like these things that like sound really good. But when you actually break it down, and especially if you're in this field and you're seeing couples and you have the intel, like, actually it's not that simple, it's
real life humans don't fit neatly in boxes and charts,
it's so true. Oh my gosh, this conversation was amazing. I really encourage everyone to familiarize yourself with Elisheva's work, because she's the best in all areas. I mean, you've been, I think, spending a lot of time right now with, on Instagram. I see a lot of your one-liners are very much Israel related, right? And also so many beautiful ways that you share our all collective frustration, our collective journey, and our collective wrestling with our faith and with our, all of those things. I feel like you really like, I imagine, right? Like it's what you're talking to yourself, and what you're feeling and what you feel like you need to hear lands for so many other people. And one little plug I wanted to give as well, which we didn't get to talk about in this conversation, but I found to be so profound, and I read it in your work, is the intimacy building exercise, which you have on your blog.
I have a blog post on it, and it's also the last video that I uploaded to my YouTube channel. So it's like, yes, I used to tell couples about it in session, but it would like take 10, 12 minutes of like precious session time. I'm like, let me make it free content. That way everyone can have it, and we don't have to use up session time for it. And I'll just tell people to go there.
So I want to leave you with a practical kind of,
tip.
What's the word? Yeah, tip, but like, you have to go find it. Like
an assignment,
exactly.
A challenge.
Because I really read it, and it was so practical, right? Like we aren't always in the ideal place of connection with our spouse, right? Like there's
seasons.
It's ebbs and flows. It's seasons. Yeah. There's seasons, and if you find yourself in like the roommate stage, or which a lot of times if you have young children, it happens, instead of like being like, that's never going to happen. It happens. We all go through it. Elisheva has this great intimacy building exercise. It's 3 steps. It takes like 10 minutes of your time, every day.
Daily. It's the consistency that's hard. It's not time consuming, but it is the consistency that's the challenge, I think.
So I challenge you, because I don't have time to tell it all to you, but I challenge you to go check it up on the YouTube, and there's a blog post on this intimacy building exercise. And I feel like it's a little extra gift to you and my listeners, that I'm cluing you in where to find it, because I found it to be really, really practical, really powerful, really doable, and effective. So Thank you, Elisheva, for being
My
here.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for this wonderful conversation. I know there's so much more we can talk about and so much more to explore, which is always the struggle of a finite podcast. But I think this is a really good start, and I hope our listeners enjoyed, and I hope to have you back soon, one day.
So this is the time where I get to chat with you and I get to kind of recap the podcast and what we spoke about and, all the stuff that's happening currently. Let me tell you, I don't know what's going on. I think there's a lot of stuff astrologically because the last 24 hours, I've been a bit out of sorts and dysregulated. And honestly, it doesn't help when you have to listen to your own podcast to prep. And that's brutal. That's brutal. So anyway, here we are. Lots of stuff happening in our worlds. Holidays are coming up. It's a lot. We'll address that in a few minutes. But I did want to take a minute and reflect on the episode that you just heard. And there's so much that we covered. And we didn't get to delve into everything deeply. And there's layers to all these conversations. It was basically a start. It was a start. We touched the surface of all of these topics, and these topics, sex, intimacy, relationships, are definitely nuanced, and they have to be treated with respect. And when I think about what we discussed and how we discussed it, I'm pretty proud of it. I think it's not common to talk about intimacy and our sexuality and our relationships in the context of our day-to-day life. I think there's a lot of wonderful people addressing a lot of the struggles, sexual abuse, and all of that gets discussed. Thank God, as it should be, and it's extremely important. And at the same time, I don't think these topics get discussed in a more, I don't want to say casual way, but in a way that's not in crisis, but in connection to our day-to-day life. And I think that's what we did here. And I hope to be able to do it more. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, because we didn't, like I said, we didn't get to get deep into all the different topics that we touched upon. And I'd be very interested to know, what would you like to hear more about? What questions come up for you? If we were to bring Elisheva back, what would you want her to focus on? So that's just kind of some of the thoughts that kind of go through my mind when I listened back to this episode, and loved hearing Elisheva. Did not love hearing myself, but that's the name of the game. Anyway, we have some questions, and these questions are very timely. I'm actually really, really grateful that somebody asked these questions, because then I get to talk about what's going on for me and on my mind. So the first question is how not to get stressed preparing for the holidays. And how do you get time to learn and pray and daven for yourself? So when I saw this question and I was reviewing the questions that I wanted to speak about today, I'm like, oh boy, we're definitely going here, because I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling stressed about the holidays. And I think it's okay to feel stressed. I mean, whether it's okay or not, I think most of us are going to feel stressed around the holidays. Right before I came to record, my husband and I were talking about the holidays and logistics, and I got so overwhelmed, and I was crying every 5 seconds. I couldn't even function and focus, because when you start to think about what the responsibilities are and how are they supposed to get done, it becomes so overwhelming. So first, I just want to say that it's stressful. And obviously I'm speaking for myself. Maybe somebody has the secret, code on how to navigate the holidays without stress. That person is not me. But what I can tell you is that I think there's like a trajectory to how it goes down, like a pattern. Like I think, right now we're about 2 weeks out, right? And so I don't have a plan or a list. I don't have like it's all just swimming in my head and it's chaotic in there. So that's really stressful and that's overwhelming. And then it's kind of like, okay, I'm just going to cry because I don't know how else to do this. The next step is when that's possible is to like ground yourself and be like, okay, what is the plan? So you start to write lists, you start to write menus and shopping lists and paper goods and all the million different details that have to come together to create Yantif. So whether you're doing this on a family scale or you're doing this on a community scale, like it's a 3-day holiday, so there's a lot of meals. I just think about what's on my plate, and we have our first community dinner, which has 100 people, and then another 5 meals, which are full, thank God, and it's such a blessing. And at the same time, it's like, okay, like how do we do this? It really is a lot. So I think first there's like a ton of overwhelm. Then it gets a little closer and you're like, okay, but I have to come up with a plan. I think once you have a plan, it's stressful, but I think that the chaos in your brain kind of relaxes and then you have to get to work. So if you want to know like how to not get stressed, I'm not the right person to ask that question, but I can tell you how I move through the stress and how I do it with the stress and how I slowly but surely piece together a plan, which does end up helping the overwhelm. But honestly, right now, you caught me in a very stressed out mindset, which hopefully is going to change. And as far as getting time to learn and daven, I don't know if you mean like on the holiday itself or prep for the holiday. But I think, again, a very personal journey, but it kind of decide like what is your goal? Like make a realistic goal. Like I want to be in shul. Like for me, I think a realistic goal would be like, I want to be in shul for a half an hour on Rosh Hashanah, hopefully on day 1 and day 2. I feel like that's a realistic goal, but more than that is not so practical and realistic. And everything else that I do, I view as part of my service to Hashem. Like if I'm preparing meals, if I'm in the kitchen, if I'm taking care of the kids, like that's part of my Rosh Hashanah service. And if and everybody will have more or less time or different priorities on what they want to accomplish on that day. But to me, Rosh Hashanah is not only about my personal service to Hashem, which it is very important. And I do want to tap into that. And as I get older, it's more and more important to me. But I also have another, purpose of Rosh Hashanah, which is to facilitate my community's relationship and access to Hashem and the holidays. So it's about like juggling those two and really putting value into both of them. Like they're both important, and it's a journey, and everybody gets to figure it out. So I'm sorry I didn't answer like how not to be stressed, but I got to give you a little bit of what's going on in my head right now. Okay, question number 2, advice for someone with a new infertility diagnosis, navigating self, relationships, and others. Okay, so first of all, I want to be in the space with you for a minute and just recognizing the weight of this diagnosis and how painful and how overwhelming it is. I've been there and I know how it feels. And that's first of all. Second of all, I think I say this for every question, but it's just the reality. We all navigate our pain and our grief and our life's struggles differently. And it's all right? Like the way that we navigate things is our unique footprint in the world, right? Like we all have to figure out what works for us. But some of the things that I can share, some of the things I've learned along the way, and maybe some of them will be helpful to you and some will not. Take the best and leave the rest, right? Take what works for you and leave what doesn't. But what I found to be really, really helpful is, I guess, I'm trying to figure out, because there's so much to this. Part of it is leaning into the reality that you're in, and whether that's, just taking time and not kind of interacting and socializing and just going inward, or if for you that's more outward, finding support outside of yourself, that's for you to decide. But I think just giving yourself a lot of grace and understanding that it's not going to look every day is not going to look the same. And for me, it was like some days I was like, okay, like this is going to be fine and I'm going to figure it out. And I feel super connected to God and this is what he wants from me. And other days I was like, I want nothing to do with this. And I reject all of this and no, thank you. I did find that for me, not as a distraction, but I did find that leaning into the reality that I was in, which allowed me to travel more and to just do fun things, because I didn't want to look back at my time that I got the diagnosis and I was struggling with such like terrible memories. I wanted to have something to show for it. So we did a lot of travel and we did things that normally would be much harder to do if we had kids. And when I look back at that time in my life, I can tap into the pain that was there, but I don't feel like it was like, there was nothing to show for it. And I was just only miserable. I really wanted to have some positive memories around that as well. So I don't know if that's helpful. Navigating yourself, the only thing that I could say is just really be curious about what comes up for you. And whatever emotion comes up for you, like stay there. Don't try to push it away. Don't shame yourself into thinking I shouldn't be feeling this. Just stay with that emotion for a little bit and see where that takes you. So a lot of self-awareness, a lot of curiosity, a lot of patience, a lot of grace, like that's what it takes to like navigate such a difficult thing and be in touch with yourself while you do it. And I wouldn't recommend doing it alone. Like support is great. Like I'm talking about like therapeutic support. If you have that, or if that's something that you can relate to, I definitely think that that's important. And as far as relationships, just be authentic. Be authentic to who you are. Wherever you feel like you need to have some boundaries, have them. And hopefully the people around you are in tune and respectful. And the best thing, if you're listening, if you know somebody who's struggling with infertility, the best way to show up is ask, hey, how can I show up for you? If you know somebody who's struggling with infertility or any struggle for that matter, the best thing to do is just be upfront and ask, say, hey, how can I support you? The person might be able to tell you. They might say, I don't know, I'm so overwhelmed. They might say, thank you. I could use a walk. I could use a check-in. I could use a coffee, but you don't know unless you're going to ask. Don't tiptoe around it. Don't avoid, just be there, be a solid presence and just ask, hey, how can I help? I know this is so hard. I know this is so difficult. How can I help? Okay. So that is question number 2. For question number 3, and it'll be our last question for today, because a lot of these questions were big, a lot of stuff. I have more to say, but I can't go on for forever. But third question, tips to evolve into being the parent you want to be. How to handle triggers and insecurities your child brings out in you. Okay, this is super, 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 super layered and loaded. And we can have a whole many podcasts just on this question. But quickly, I think it's a little bit connected to what I said about the infertility question, about how to evolve into the parent you want to be. I think there's so much to be said with being curious with ourselves and really noticing like what comes up for us. And if you notice that there's a certain behavior that a child triggers for you, kind of be curious about why and explore that. And that might lead you to a really, really, really special path of healing some of your own, struggles and traumas and, things that you wish didn't happen to you. I mean, we all have stuff. And even if you thank God, many people have beautiful, healthy childhoods, there are certain things that can trigger us, and that's okay. We're human, and I think it's important to realize that our children are going to trigger us because it is such an important relationship. And there's so much responsibility that we feel around parenting, and behaviors can be a lot, and it's just a hard job. I think we have to realize it's a hard job and we're going to be triggered. And the only way through that is, there's avoidance. You can do that, but I think you'll end up right back to where you started. But if you really want to evolve into the parent you want to be, it's all about noticing the things that trigger you, asking, like doing some of that work, doing some of the work on yourself, because the more work that you can do on yourself, the better parent you can be, the more effective you can show up in a more effective way. You can focus on, when we start to be curious about all those triggers and all those things and that bring up stuff for us, and then we get so sidetracked by how we're feeling that we don't really show up the way we want to. But when we do all that work, when our child does have behaviors or they are struggling with something, we can really show up for them and not have our own stuff distract from that relationship. So again, lifelong journey. We're all on it. We're all trying to be the best parents we can be. And I think just having that question makes you a really awesome parent, and you're already on the right track. So keep that up and continue to ask yourself the right questions, continue to find support, continue to show up for yourself and to honor yourself and your journey so you can show up for your children in the way that you want to. That's it, y'all. Thanks for being here. Can't wait to be back here again for episode number 3.
I'm your host, Chavie Brook. It takes a village to produce this and create this. And I'm so grateful to my amazing team. Our producer is Eli Ben-Chion. Audio is edited and mixed by Chase Martin and Louis Quero. Production assistant, Shayna Ben-Chion. Design and creative is Rifki Markosian. Music by Basia Schechter and Daniel Ori. And this is totally unexpected.